France has long been recognized as one of Europe's largest nations, holding the position of the world's second-largest economy and possessing a unique, romantic culture that is instantly recognizable. For over 500 years, France has consistently maintained its role as a major power, with profound cultural, political, and military influence across Europe and the globe. Notably, from the 17th to the 20th century, France established a leading colonial empire with vast territories spanning Europe, Asia, and Africa. Today, we will turn back the pages of history to learn about the First French Empire, an empire that shook the world during its time. The First French Empire was the brainchild of King Napoleon Bonaparte, inaugurated on May 18, 1804, and officially concluded on April 6, 1814. This brief but highly turbulent political regime is intrinsically linked to the name of Napoleon Bonaparte, an exceptional military genius of France. The French Bourgeois Revolution, which took place from 1789 to 1799, abolished the long-standing feudal system, liberated the populace, and paved the way for the development of capitalism. However, the Czech First Republic, a major achievement of the revolution, quickly proved incapable of resisting the counter-revolutionary efforts of royalist forces and various other opposing factions. Facing this unstable situation, in the early morning of November 10, 1799, known as the 18 Brumaire, according to the revolutionary calendar, Napoleon Bonaparte successfully executed a coup d'état, overthrowing the Directory government established under the 1795 Constitution and seizing control. Following the coup, the consulate regime was established. Although formally led by 3 consuls, it was essentially a military dictatorship, with Napoleon Bonaparte serving as the special consul and de facto head of state. Although the overthrown royal family still plotted to restore the monarchy, early 1804, the results of the plebiscite on November 6, 1804, ratified the Senate's decree, transferring the Republican government to the chief consul and granting Napoleon Bonaparte the title of Emperor of the French, formally legalizing the birth of the First French Empire. The adoption of the Constitution of 1804 marked the establishment of this imperial period in French history. On December 2, 1804, Napoleon was formally crowned as the head of the French Empire. Driven by his ambition to conquer Europe, Napoleon Bonaparte led France into a series of continuous wars, beginning with the War of the Third Coalition. Napoleon demonstrated his outstanding military talent by repeatedly crushing the military alliances formed against France. The Third Coalition, formed in 1805 between Britain, Russia, and Austria, was the next adversary. Napoleon chose Austria as his starting target, recognizing the need to defeat Austria, Russia, and Prussia before they could unite. In April 1805, Britain, Russia, Austria, Prussia, and Sweden signed the Treaty of St. Petersburg to establish the coalition. In July of that year, Napoleon's Grande Armée swiftly encircled the Austrian army at Ulm, and General Mack surrendered on October 29th. This was a great victory for Napoleon, but he still faced the Russian army under Mikhail Kutuzov and other remaining Austrian forces. After defeating the Austrians at Ulm and occupying Vienna, Napoleon pursued the enemy, employing a diplomatic tactic, offering peace. This led Britain's allies to mistakenly believe the French army was weakened. However, Kutuzov's forces joined the armies of Alexander I and Franz II at the Battle of Austerlitz. The Battle of Austerlitz took place on December 2nd, 1805. Despite being numerically superior, the Russo-Austrian coalition was defeated, thanks to the timely reinforcement by Count Marshal Davout. And brilliant tactics, Napoleon and his 73,000 soldiers triumphed over the 85,000 enemy troops. However, this victory only mitigated the threat to the French Empire for a short period. By 1806, the continuous growth of the French army spurred Prussia, Britain, Russia, Saxony, and Sweden to form the Fourth Coalition. In October of the same year, the First French Empire's army annihilated 25,000 Prussian troops, October 14, 1806, and took only 19 days to march into Berlin. On November 21, 1806, Napoleon issued the Continental Blockade Policy to isolate Britain economically. The relentless military campaigns exhausted the Grande Armée, necessitating a period of rest before the next Imperial War. On June 14, 1807, after 14 months of active pursuit, France won a decisive victory against Russia at the Battle of Friedland, one of Napoleon's largest engagements. Initially, the Russians, confident in their numerical advantage, concentrated their attack on a small French contingent, led by General Lannes. Napoleon anticipated this maneuver, exploiting the enemy's vulnerability when the majority of the Russian army crossed the Saint Helena River to attack Friedland. Napoleon concentrated his forces to crush the Russian attacks on the surrounding villages, then shelled and captured Friedland. This victory concluded the War of the Fourth Coalition in favor of France. On July 7, 1807, building on this overwhelming military success, Napoleon forced Russia to sign the White Treaty of Tilsit, temporarily ending 2 years of continuous bloodshed on the European continent. Through this treaty, Napoleon Bonaparte established the French Empire as the absolute power in Europe. The subsequent Napoleonic Wars helped the French Empire extend its reach across nearly the entire continent, with Bonaparte family members appointed as monarchs in the newly established kingdoms. Starting in 1807, France began intervening in the Iberian Peninsula, Spain. Thanks to the Treaty of Fontainebleau, France could move troops through Spain to control Portugal. However, the French invasion met fierce resistance from the Spanish independence movement, lasting 6 years, 1808 to 1814. This war inflicted heavy losses and became one of the key factors that led to the eventual collapse and weakening of the First French Empire. In 1809, the clash between Austria and France in the next coalition war erupted once again. France was victorious again, defeating the Fifth Coalition at the bloody Battle of Wagram, which lasted 2 days, July 5–6, 1809. Napoleon defeated the Austrian forces led by General Karl, despite initial successful counterattacks by the Austrians in some sectors. Napoleon concentrated a fierce artillery barrage, then ordered General Davout to attack the left wing, Poniatowski to strike the right, and launched a massive infantry column attack directly into the Austrian center. The relentless French assault overwhelmed the Austrian forces, forcing General Karl to retreat. Consequently, the Austrian emperor was compelled to sign the Treaty of Schönbrunn, October 14th. By 1812, the First French Empire reached its territorial and demographic peak, controlling over half of Europe with a population exceeding 44 million people. With the support of allies Prussia and Austria, France was fully capable of countering the Russian Empire and Britain. However, the continental blockade policy and ensuing economic instability between Russia and France escalated diplomatic tensions. On June 24, 1812, this unresolved tension led what Napoleon Bonaparte to decide to invade Russian territory. Russia responded by implementing the scorched earth policy against the French. On October 19, 1812, after a month lingering in the emptied and burnt Moscow, Napoleon commenced his retreat. He planned to detour south to Kaluga to seize rich food and supply stores intended for the Russian army. But his forces were cut off by the Russian army commanded by Commander-in-Chief Mikhail Kutuzov. On October 24th, the two sides clashed fiercely at the small town of Maloyaroslavets. The town changed hands 8 times in the ferocious battle and was almost completely destroyed. Although the French controlled the town, the Russians secured a crucial strategic victory. The exhausted French army no longer dared to push towards the supply depots at Kaluga. Instead, they were forced to retreat along the previously ravaged Mojaisk Road. This marked the disaster in the military career of Napoleon Bonaparte and the history of the First French Empire, as over 300,000 French soldiers perished due to disease, starvation, and the cold during the retreat. Starting in 1813, the war against the Sixth Coalition, comprising 12 nations, intensified, culminating in the Battle of Leipzig, the Battle of the Nations, with over 500,000 troops engaged. The Russian army played the principal role, contributing nearly half of the 300,000 Allied troops. Napoleon commanded only about 200,000 soldiers. The fierce 4-day battle took place near Leipzig in Saxony, Germany. Initially, Napoleon gained the upper hand. However, the turning point occurred when the Saxon allies suddenly switched sides to the Sixth Coalition. Napoleon was forced to use his Imperial Guard to plug the holes in his defensive line. France ultimately lost the battle. During the retreat, the French engineers prematurely blew up the bridge over the Elster River, cutting off the escape route for 20,000 French soldiers left behind. France lost a total of 80,000 men. The Leipzig defeat cost Napoleon his last major ally, as Bavaria also joined the opposition. Shortly after, French forces were compelled to withdraw from German and Dutch territories to defend their homeland. In January 1814, France was attacked on all fronts. The coalition cleverly declared they were only fighting against Napoleon as an individual. Inside France, the Legislative Assembly and the Senate turned against him, demanding peace and civil liberties. Public support for the emperor had severely diminished compared to the war's beginning. The coalition's campaign lasted until March 1814, culminating in the occupation of Paris by Prussia and Russia. Napoleon Bonaparte was forced to abdicate on April 6, 1814, and was exiled to the island of Elba. This event marked the end of the First French Empire on the nation's soil. However, despite his exile on Elba, Napoleon Bonaparte monitored the continental situation, harboring hopes of returning. He managed to return to France, overthrow the Bourbon monarchy, and restore the empire. Upon regaining power, Napoleon confronted the Seventh Coalition and suffered a devastating defeat at the Battle of Waterloo. This loss definitively ended the remnants of the First French Empire. 3 days after the defeat, Napoleon abdicated for the second time, June 22, 1815. This brief return, known as the Hara 100 Days, concluded with the former emperor being exiled to the remote island of Saint Helena in the Atlantic until his death. Though short-lived, the First French Empire remains a pivotal moment in the history of France and the world. This formidable empire, inextricably linked to the military genius of Napoleon Bonaparte, significantly contributed to the future growth and strength of the French Empire.